Welcome to the Startup Grind.
So how we normally get started is just kind of finding out a little bit about you and kind of your background, so you can kind of take us from childhood, where you grew up, and kind of you can give us a little background story.
Sure. Well, I grew up here in Orange County. I grew up in the city of Westminster. Went to UC Irvine. Moved to Newport Beach in the latter years. A lot of people at UC Irvine tend to do that. And started working as a journalist for the Los Angeles Times and the Orange County Register right after I graduated from college. And then saw the web in 1994 and thought, wow, I really want to be part of that. And the newspapers that I was working for didn't really get it, didn't know what they wanted to do. So joined up with a friend of mine who actually had a startup in 1995 that was called Maximize Software at the time. And we started putting people online in Orange County. So we put the Orange County Fair online, we put the Orange County Register online, we put the entire Orange County county government online. It was a fun time in '95 registering all these domain names for people in Orange County. And we did so well in that the business closed a year later. So there's my entrepreneurial story. Actually, my friend decided to focus on the software side of things, and the online stuff he didn't continue with. So I kind of went out on my own and started writing about how search engines were operating, because it was part of what we were doing in putting people online, was getting them listed and doing publicity for them. And that really turned into, what today is Search Engine Land, and the conference series that we do and everything. It was like a whole new area that nobody was really covering at the time, and so I ended up building a business around that.
That's awesome.
With a brief detour over Britain for 12 years, because my wife is British, so she had us move back over there and then felt sorry for me, and so we came back here in 2008 to go back to living in Newport Beach.
Great. Is there something or someone that influenced your career path towards entrepreneurship?
I think just growing up in California, if you grow up here and you go to school, it's inevitable you're going to hear about the gold rush and people running and grabbing shovels or wanting to sell the shovels because the people who bought them didn't make the money, the people who sold them did. And so you kind of grow up and you hear that kind of excitement happening. And then I can also remember reading and hearing so much about what was going on in Silicon Valley when you had the personal computer revolution that came in. And so that was inspiring to me. Like, I want to be part of something new. I want to be part of this kind of revolution that's happening. Oh gosh darn it, all finished up. And then the internet came along, and suddenly I had that opportunity as well. So I guess that's kind of the influence with it from there.
So let's talk a little bit about SEO. Most of us have heard of the word. Some people know what it is, some people don't. Maybe you could give us your definition of what SEO is.
Sure. Yes, I can actually. SEO is the process of finding ways to be in front of people who are searching where you're not having to pay to appear. And by pay to appear, I mean pay for the actual listings. You may very well be paying for somebody to help increase the chances that you will show up. And then that's in opposition to what's sometimes called PPC, or what's sometimes referred to as SEM, which is you're going to show up where people are searching, but you are going to pay directly to a search engine or something to make that happen. And it's often misinterpreted as, I'm going to show up for certain keywords on Google. And what I try to stress to people is that no, SEO is about understanding how people search and get information and figuring out what you do to increase the chances that you show up in the information that they see. So if you turn on your phone and you open up Facebook and it's suggesting places that are nearby, it's an SEO aspect of figuring out, why is Facebook showing me this stuff? Or if you were using Foursquare and it was suggesting things to you again. You didn't actually do a search, but it's giving you suggestions in response to a search need that you have, and an SEO trying to figure out, well, what do I do to increase the odds to show up there? And Google's part of it as well.
So which major factors should a startup focus on for search engine ranking success? Is there any particular focus that you would suggest?
The success with SEO, and I think with any kind of online marketing that you're going to do, comes back to having really good content. So, if you're a startup, And content's hard, and people can groan when they hear that kind of word, and sometimes people don't really understand what they mean by content, but just the listing of your products and services isn't good content. We were looking at a site that today, it was a fascinating story where they're an online real estate company, and apparently they wanted to get a lot of traffic, and so they basically turned themselves into the BuzzFeed of real estate. And it was like, these 25 crazy things you'd never do in North Dakota, and these 5 different things that only people in Los Angeles do. And they started up a whole blog that isn't the part of their business, right? Their business is trying to get listings and help people use their real estate tools, but they created content that meshed well with their kind of service. And so that's one of the things I think that startups may not do sometimes, if they don't have good content that goes along with their product. And so it's like, well, I want people to discover me. And it's like, well, okay, you are oftentimes one of many different things that are out there. And unless your product is so unique, you're probably gonna have to come up with something other than just what your product is. And the other big thing that I think that they tend to forget when it comes to search is that there's just no research into how people are seeking you out. So it is not uncommon that someone creates a product or service and they don't actually think about the words people are using to locate them. It's like, I've got, every time your last speaker was somebody who has an app for finding weed, right? So, and the assumption might be, well, people are trying to find weed, but it may be actually most people are looking for a pot app. And you don't discover that until you do, there are ways for you to do this kind of keyword search, but if you've gone out there and created the weed app and actually everybody's searching for pot app, then you've kind of missed it. And there's things you can do to adjust it, but understanding that kind of language is important.
Do you feel video is important, or is it better than just strictly text and photos, or does it matter?
Video is like its whole other world. And I think it's super important because more and more people are spending time with video online. The difficulties are that the way the content gets ranked and the influence thing can change so much that are different. So in terms of what will happen with video, you may have to be doing a lot more work in terms of building up the viralness of your content and so on that's going with it from there. If you're looking for a big audience, and there's a lot more gaming that I think that goes on there, that not to say that there's not gaming that goes on in traditional SEO, but I think that the search engines are further behind in dealing with some of that stuff. But for my kids, when they're looking for information, it's not uncommon that they go to YouTube and do a search, right? To me, it's sort of an alien notion. I was trying to get them set up with a Minecraft server, and I was like, I found plenty of information on video, which were like 14-year-old kids who wanted to tell me as they talked to their camera for 5 minutes on how to do it. And I was like, why couldn't you have just written this down? I could have read it in 30 seconds. But they're thinking like, I'll just talk to the camera. And so understanding that's important because there's an audience there that's searching in that way.
Right. Are there any do's and don'ts that you would suggest?
Don't use any of those companies that email you about getting SEO or search. I mean, if you haven't figured that out, no one, and I mean no one, is going to email you out of the blue and say, hey, I found something on your site and I figured it out and I have the secret answer. It's awful. And unfortunately, a lot of people perceive that as what good SEO or what SEO is supposed to be. So, that's one terrible mistake. Another mistake is I think sometimes startups rely too heavily on it. It's like, well, we're a startup and we'll get this SEO traffic and it'll be great. It's like, no, you're probably not going to get all that SEO traffic. And even if you do, it's undependable traffic. I mean, it can fluctuate. You can have things that change with it. So you want it as part of your marketing mix, but you don't want it to be like the marketing plan. Or that they don't think about it at all, which goes back to the keyword things and the research and stuff that I was talking about. Or, I've seen any number of startups that have apps that their idea of the website was my listing in the App Store. And it's like, well, people actually still go onto the web, they do searches, and they'll find the app listing in the App Store, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't have a website, nor that your website shouldn't tell you what's going on with the app and all the possibilities that go with that as well.
What are some questions, let's just say you can hire a company to help you. Is there any specific question that you would say maybe are the top 1 or 2 questions that you should ask a company that you're going to actually hire to help you with your SEO?
I would say that you want to, first of all, references, like anybody that you hire, and check the references. I always love the person who once suggested to me that you get 3 references and throw them out and ask for 3 more, because everybody has 3 good references, but it's harder to come up with the other ones. Of course, I would hate that if anybody ever did that to me. But, you know, you want to get the references, you want to talk to the companies that they've dealt with and understand from those companies what kind of experience they had with it. You, I think, want to understand that you're dealing with a company that's used to working with a company that's like you. And so it can be difficult because people won't understand, like, well, this person says they do SEO for $50 an hour, and this person says they do SEO for $10 a page, and this person says that they're going to, want to charge me a monthly retainer of $2,000, and who's ripping me off and who's not? And the answer is they all are, none of them are. The companies that charge a lot for SEO that are dealing with large clients, big brands, have a lot of client service that comes with it. If we want you to come in and have a meeting, you talk to our executive, and that's going to take like a half a day. And so they're going to be charging a lot more because they're being demanded a lot more. Versus the person who's just out on their own, maybe a great SEO dealing with, a bunch of smaller companies that don't have those kinds of demands. But then they might not be so good in understanding what a brand might necessarily need. So if you were a startup, finding an SEO that's dealing with other startups is always good. I think is one thing to look at. If you're in a particular industry, finding an SEO that's familiar with that industry is an advantage. You could be concerned, well, are they going to work for a competitor or whatever, but oftentimes either it's not going to be that big of an issue, or at least they're familiar with the industry and they could take on another client in that. So those are some things.
I like it. Good. Can you discuss a strategy that can help get us to the top of a search page?
Yes. Just pay me lots of money and I'll make it happen. No.
One tip.
There's, see, it's not that easy. There are black hat strategies you could do, but you shouldn't, because they're not long term and they generally will get you into trouble. So I wouldn't recommend doing that sort of stuff. If you were looking for the number one way to start showing up quickly, I would say have a blog, be blogging a lot on it so that you constantly have fresh topic content, and see if you can find things that align with popular topics. Because Google in particular likes to reward fresh content, and if you can do a good job with that kind of content, that might move you up with it from there. But really, SEO is more of a long-term game. It's more about building your foundation, because even though you might not go to the top in the first month, you'll find in like a year that you've actually built that foundation. And once you've built up the reputation of your site, it's much easier for the content that you have within it to do better.
What do you think are the current top channels to focus on?
Oh, well, that's so broad. In terms of online marketing?
Yeah.
So I think social is really important, obviously. There's so much attention that's focused on it. So I think you want to be looking at that. And within social, I would probably put Facebook at the top. Personally, I see a lot of advantages with Twitter and focusing on there. But some people, for example, find Pinterest is really, really big for them. And so, it goes off with that. Some people are finding that Tumblr is the right match for them. So, but overall, I would say experiment with different kinds of social and see where you're getting some synergy with it. I'd be looking at SEO as well. I might consider paid search, which is, by the way, when you're asking how would you get to the top in a hurry, I would probably do paid search, because that'll get you to the top instantly. But it can also help you understand if the audience is going to respond to what you're hoping will work if your SEO starts to kick in. So you could put a lot of effort into trying to do SEO, or you could launch some ads to begin with and then discover if, hey, these people are actually converting for us. Yes, so let's do more of the paid search, and let's also do the efforts on the SEO front so that we have that as a backup, or maybe free traffic that kind of comes with it from there. Content marketing, in terms of developing out good content, will support both the SEO and the social aspects of what you're doing. I think video is really promising. Just more labor intensive to do it, but there's smart ways you can pick up there, and I would totally not be ignoring the mobile audience. And whether that means having a mobile app or just understanding that half your audience may be coming to you on a mobile device, so what's happening when they arrive, that's really important too.
We hear growth hacking a lot. What are your thoughts on the word growth hacking?
Well, when I first heard it, I was like, what the hell is this growth hacking? I thought it was just marketing. So, I kind of first had a negative reaction. I should feel bad against Sean and other people who popularized it. I feel a little bit bad about that. But, growth hacking to me really is marketing. And I sometimes think that maybe that term for marketing has caught on better with startups and other people because they're used to the idea of hacking away at a problem or trying to come up with a smarter way of doing something. And so, and it seems as I've talked to a bunch of startups and interacted with people that the whole marketing aspect gets forgotten. It's like, I got a great idea. This is great. We're going to launch the idea. And it's like you haven't figured out what your growth strategy was. And your growth strategy includes the marketing and how you're going to do that, how you're going to attract people in. And so, I think also there's both positive and negative connotations that come with that. You should have a marketing strategy. You should understand how you're going to attract an audience and how they're going to grow your business. You probably should not be thinking about it in terms of, and I'm going to find these shortcuts to doing it, because shortcuts quite often are not shortcuts and they take you down blind alleys or they don't pay off in the long term. And so that's why sometimes people will think, well, growth hacking, I'll do the SEO, and they end up doing this weird black hat SEO type of stuff, and then they get into trouble and then they're like rap genius and they're knocked back down by Google or something. But there can be the sense of, I'm going to do marketing, but I'm going to do very smart ROI, metrics-driven marketing. And I'm going to understand that if I tend to take a campaign, how has that actually worked? And did it pay off for me? And I'm not just going to spend a lot of money, on a TV ad and hope that that necessarily works. I'm actually going to be tracking all this stuff and figuring out, what the payoff was in real dollars in the end.
You talk about traffic. Is there any way that a better way to maybe attract traffic? Like how do we go about it if we're like a new startup? Like, do we hop on Twitter and we start tweeting and hopefully people come, or do we follow people and unfollow? And there's all these different things that people tell me to do, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Don't do that. So the other thing that'll probably make people groan is if I say things like, you should be real, but you should. Would you want to follow any company that just follows? Somebody the other day said to me, hey, please make sure you follow me back because I followed you and now I'm going to start unfollowing the people I followed. And I was like, oh dear, what will I do? I don't care, don't follow me. And then I went back and I was curious and I looked and they were like tweeting to every single person the same sort of thing. And it's like, okay, have fun with that. You can do it. You can be a company, you can go out there and just follow people to build up your Twitter followers, but I think it would be much smarter to engage in people that make sense. So if you were a startup and you had something that was really unique, I'm trying to think of something that's really timely right now, but right now, if you were a startup and you had something that was really unique that was somehow related to, Cuba or Cuban cigars or metrics about who's going to the movie or opinions or things like that, that's been all the news that's been going on today, and there's plenty of people tweeting about it, and there's smart ways that you can go back to people who are influencers who have large followings and say, hey, we actually do this sort of thing, or this is something we've discovered, and you've attracted some attention that way. And, as somebody who has a lot of people who tweets at them, I love that. I love when somebody spots something that's great, and I want to make sure I give out credit back to somebody who spotted it or whatever. So, that's one of the smart things that you could do. So the question was, how do I get traffic or
attract quality traffic to your site?
So attracting quality traffic, I think, goes back to having a good marketing plan, which is, who am I trying to attract? What kind of an audience am I trying to get here? What are my goals when that audience arrives? And then how do I go and do it? Because you could turn your own blog into a BuzzFeed of anything, right? And get lots and lots of attention, but it might not even be the right attention for the effort that you're putting into it. So it can really vary.
Each person can be a little different. Each company.
And they should be different,
right. Is there anything that you think, as far as today's startups, what we should invest in as far as marketing, digital marketing? Should we do like 50-50? Is print marketing?
I don't know that anybody would know the answer to that. I think it varies. It's going to just really vary from company to company on what seems to make sense. I think that you should be evaluating all these different channels And I think you should be doing a lot of testing and then figure out what makes sense to put, the investment into it. Some things, of course, don't really cost you that much. I mean, starting a Twitter account is nothing. And, it's more if you're really trying to invest a lot of time and energy into it. But just having a Twitter account, I think everybody should have a Twitter account. At the very least, it's like a digital business card for people to follow you on and that sort of thing. So,
can you give us some insight on how you see the future of digital marketing?
More. I think that the social aspect is going to continue to grow and explode. And some of it will implode. So, and that's the difficulty, right? You can be like, wow, Snapchat is really huge. We should start doing the Snapchat ads that they barely even have. And, next year it could disappear. So it's very, very difficult to decide, where do you put your energy into the new things. I probably wouldn't spend a lot of time worrying about Hello or whatever it was that launched. But I probably would be investing time into something like, like a Pinterest, which really did kind of carry through and keep its legs going. So, I think social is going to continue to grow. I think search is going to continue to be really important. Those are like the bedrocks of online digital traffic. I think video will keep going. I think you're going to continue to see new ad formats that come in and have any more opportunities for people to take your money to advertise. So alongside that, the future will continue to be this metrics-driven marketing. Is this stuff paying off for me, and is it going with it from there? There'll be unknowns too. I mean, I would have never anticipated something like Snapchat would come along, and who knows what will kind of come along with it after that. So,
leadership is a key to a successful company. As a founder, what are some effective things that you do as a leader?
Oh, terrible leader. Just a little background. So, most people know us because of our site, Search Engine Land and Marketing Land, but our company is called Third Door Media, which I'm a founding partner with my company CEO, Chris Elwell. Unfortunately, he takes care of all of our business stuff, so I can focus on the content side of things. And I don't know if I'm a great leader or not, but I'll tell you the things I try to stick by. I think it's important to be quick and efficient with your decisions. So I try not to let things hang about. I think people want to act on stuff, and that if they're asking you for answers, they want a decisive answer, and they kind of want you to go with it. But it's important to take in all those opinions. But I think that's also part of what a leader does, is you're taking in all the opinions, and then ultimately you're going to make a decision to make sure everybody rallies around behind that. I think it's also really important that you enable the people who are working for you to make their own decisions and act upon them. So if you're trying to micromanage every single thing, you just get nothing done. And people might not do everything precisely the way that you want, but they're going to get more done and probably better stuff done than if you actually did it the exact way that you think in your own mind should be done. And that's the other thing too, is that I think a good leader understands that no, you don't know the answer to everything. And so the way you think it should be done isn't always the right way that should be happening. I think it's important to reward people and praise them and make them feel like they are appreciated. And there's probably more things I'm not thinking of, but those are things that come to mind.
No, those are great. If you had a chance to start over, what would be the number one thing that you might have done differently?
It's hard to say. I kind of did have a chance to start over. When I first started going out on my own, and I created what was called Search Engine Watch at the time, I sold that to a company called Meckler Media, and then continued to work with them for 10 years and built up a conference series alongside of them. Then they sold all that to another company, and I decided to go off my own way and basically do everything I had done before just for myself. That way, if it got sold again, I was actually selling it. And so it was interesting because the things I realized that I wanted to do differently were not use customized software. So our old thing used to use this horrible CMS, and we were using WordPress. And we used a lot of cloud-based services. And our company has 45 people, work entirely virtual. There's no central office or anything like that. And we're spread out all over the US. The joke is whenever we want to hire somebody, it's like, can we get somebody in one of these 19 states where we've actually set up business in, because it's such a pain to do it in a 20th or whatever. But we're spread out in that way, and that was one of the big things, was this, can I use the off-the-shelf stuff? Because it makes life so much easier when you're dealing with, say, things going through Google Docs or whatever. But there are still cases where, I think you need to have some customized things. And some businesses, like a BuzzFeed or a Vox Media, their technology is really crucial. The fact that they aren't using, off the shelf type of stuff, that they've actually kind of built it. So it's hard to make that kind of decision. But aside from that, I'm not certain what I would do differently. Yeah.
Do you remember the tipping point for your company's success? Maybe when you reached a goal that you set?
Well, when we started the company, we started Third Door Media in 2006. And if you recall, in 2007 was kind of a scary year, and 2008 was even worse. And so in some ways, I think the tipping point for us was 2010, because we launched a whole new company with very ambitious plans, by the way, with no outside funding, so we don't have any investors or anything. And it was really like, everything we thought we were going to, in 2007 we got going, and 2008 we had expanded, and by the end of 2008, the economy was crashing all around, and we're like, wow, we're actually going to have to pull back on some of these things. Now, the good news for us was we didn't lay anybody off. And, we continued to pay for ourselves, and that was all great. But we kind of put our expansion on hold, and we kind of pulled back on the core stuff. So when we got through 2009 and things started turning, to me, that was sort of the tipping point, which was like, wow, if we got through those years, we should be able to get through anything. And I think 2011 was another tipping point, because we actually declared a dividend, and we paid, because a lot of the people in the company actually have small shares in the company. So, we paid everybody in the company with shares an actual dividend on some of the profits. And, when some people who aren't, shareholders or whatever, we made sure that they got bonuses and such. And that was really nice. It was like, wow, we've built this business, and we've been able to share the profits back to the people who helped build this from the very beginning, all of which are actual employees, not VC firms or whatever, with it from there. So, those are some kind of the tipping points that come along.
What one piece of valuable advice might you give to today's startup?
Don't give up on your dream. I think what I find interesting from a lot of startups and entrepreneurs is that I'm not very imaginative, and I never considered myself an entrepreneur. I just like to write about stuff. So, our startup is a media company, and that's exciting, and I'm glad we have it. And, and it certainly, I feel as a journalist, it's cool, because so many journalists don't have work, and we have a company that employs people to do that. But, it's not like and we did create a content that didn't exist, that was out there before, but it wasn't like I came up with a great idea of a new product or service that no one had ever had before. So, I think that if you're a startup and you come up with these kinds of services, that is great, and, to go through with it. On the same hand, you might want to, there are a lot of crazy ideas out there too, so maybe you do want to give up on some of them, but I think the other thing is, perhaps just be also realistic. Yeah, it's hard. Don't give up, but be realistic. But don't give up. You can do anything, but as long as it makes sense. But I think that, it's one thing to kind of have the dream, but I think you also want to have some concrete ways on how you think you're going to get there. And so, sometimes there isn't the marketing plan, or you don't really know what the profit model is going to be, this or whatever. And I think, the stories of the Snapchats saying, no, we don't want your $3 billion or whatever, those are relatively rare. I think most people are going to be in a case of, well, I need to figure out how I'm going to make this work. So, don't know if that's that helpful.
Yes,
but,
that is. As a successful entrepreneur, how do you balance your work life and your family life?
I work at home, so.
That's sometimes challenging, though.
It is. Well, my kids have grown up they've always known I work from home. In fact, it's funny, because my kids used to think Google was a person, because I work at home, and they've always grown up that. And I would do a lot of interaction with Google because I cover search. And so the phone would ring, and my wife would say, "Oh, it's Google's on the phone for you." And okay. And we used to live in Britain, so I would take these trips to go back for a week, and like, where's Daddy? Oh, Daddy's off to see Google. And so you can imagine, like, if you're a kid, it's hard to actually think, well, Google must be this person because Google's always calling, Daddy's going off on trips to visit Google, you know. But, you know, they kind of grew up understanding, you know, I have my office, and if I'm working, if the door is shut, that's good or whatever. You know, that they know what's going on with that. And the hard thing for me was, like, when I was in Britain, I used to work these terrible hours because I'd get up at 10 and work till 5, then I would have dinner, and then everybody I needed to deal with in the U.S. would get up, so then I would work again. So once I moved back into the U.S., it got much better, and I really just started working sort of 9 to 5 or 10 to 6, that sort of thing. And it really is. I'm at the end of the day, and my wife has dinner. She makes dinner for us all, and we all have always eaten dinner together, and so that's just, you know, when I'm not in the office, I'm not doing work. And you know, once you've built up that kind of discipline, it works. The other thing was I used to work on weekends, and I just stopped. And, you know, people are like, well, how can you do it? You have to work. And it's like, no, you really don't. If you turn off everything and walk out of the office, I promise you, it's all going to still be there when you get back on Monday. It's kind of related also with email because so much of our lives revolve around email. And I'm kind of bad on it at the moment, right? Because my inbox has like 28 messages, which at that point, most people are like, I wish I had only 28 messages. But usually I only have about 10 items that are in it. And there's been a long stretch where I was like inbox 0 at the end of the day. And the people were like, well, how is that possible? And I'd be like, well, you know, first of all the stuff that you haven't answered for a month, just delete it. You're never going to get to it. You're never going to get to it. Or put it all into a folder. Take everything that you have, put it into a folder if it's not, you know, less than a week old or whatever. And then, you know, you're dealing with what you get to. But if you walk away, things sort themselves out. The important stuff will come back to you, and you deal with it that way because it gets bumped back up on you. The things that you didn't get to either weren't that important or somebody else has sort of solved it for you. I think a personal turning point for me was I had 2 vacations one year. The first one we went to Hawaii, and I kept trying to do all my emails so I could keep the email under control, right? I had to keep my email under control. So I did, you know, the little breaks would come back from the beach and I'd be in my email, whatever. And I never really relaxed. So the second trip we went on, I said, oh, this will be an unplugged trip. I'm going to do it. And I put the vacation responder on, and we went off for a week and didn't do anything. And I got back, and it was fine. Because there were other people who were working for you, and they took care of stuff, and people understood you weren't around, they left you whatever. And I whipped through all my email when I got done, and there were like 1,000 messages, right? But I mean, most of the stuff, you go, whip this, I don't need that, delete this was all, you know, whatever. And like about 2 hours, I'd gotten through it all. And I was much more relaxed, so. Anyway.
That's good, though. I like that you turn off and you take the weekends off, and great advice. Do you have a personal mission statement that you follow?
The company mission statement, which I keep forgetting to tell the company, is like we're having a company meeting, like I really need to tell the company what our mission is, but it's like helping marketers succeed, right? You know, my personal mission statement is probably just try to do a great job. I've always been really driven to try to do, you know, be a perfectionist and do the best job that I can. And so, you know, whatever I'm doing, I'm always trying to just do the best job I possibly can and, you know, live up to that, I guess.
I think you have.
Okay.
The last question I have for you tonight is, how do you and your team hope to continue to change and impact the world?
I feel like I'm in that Silicon Valley thing at the end where everybody's like, and we're going to change the world. I mean, I honestly don't know that we even have had aspirations of changing the world. You know, it's back to what I said before. You know, we see our job as helping marketers succeed, and then, you know, we hope that the marketer successful. I don't know if that changes the world so much, but, you know, it can't be. It's funny, you have some people who are involved with marketing, especially in the advertising, and they'll show these great TV commercials like, oh my God, we've changed the world. It's like, I don't know. But, you know, if you think about marketing from the aspect that it helps good companies succeed, and good companies themselves can change the world, and if we're enabling good companies to be successful, then that's great. And hopefully it's trickle up or something like it from there.
Well, thank you so much for coming out and sharing your story with us and some great tips and advice. So let's give him a big round of applause.